We continue our session. Visual principles are guidelines used to enhance the effectiveness of visual elements in instructional materials. These principles help in designing clear, engaging, and educationally effective visual content that supports learning and comprehension. We ensure that visuals are clearly and easily understandable, avoid clutter, and ensure that the message or information is communicated without ambiguity. The use of simple, straightforward images and text, avoid excessive details or decorations that might distract from the main message. We use contrasting colors, fonts, and sizes to make important elements stand out and enhance readability. Ensure high contrast between text and background colors, use of bold or larger fonts to headings and key points to make them easily noticeable, and establish a clear visual hierarchy to guide the viewer's attention to the most important information first. Use size, color, and placement to create a high hierarchy with important information should be the prominent, which less critical details can be smaller in font or placed in less noticeable areas. In terms of consistency, we maintain consistent visual styles throughout the instructional materials that you're going to produce to create a cohesive and professional appearance. To apply this, we use consistent colors, fonts, and design elements across all materials. It helps in reinforcing branding and making the content easier to follow. When it comes to the alignment, we align visual elements to create a structured and organized layout. We ensure that the text, images, and other elements are aligned properly. Use grids or guides to help with alignment and maintain a balanced layout. When it comes also to proximity, we place related items close to each other to indicate their relationship and improve comprehension. In terms of application, we group related information or visual together, avoid placing unrelated items near each other to prevent confusion. What about repetition? Repeated visual elements to create a sense of unity and reinforce key messages. Use recurring colors, shapes, or patterns to tie different parts of the content together. Repetition will help in creating a consistent look and reinforcing important concepts. When it comes to simplicity, we keep visuals simple and avoid unnecessary complexity that might hinder understanding. We focus on essential information and use straightforward design. Simply, we use graphics and text to ensure that the content is easily digestible. How to apply this in simple design. No? So visual principles are crucial to creating instructional materials that are not visually appealing, but also effective conveying information. By applying this, educators or teachers can easily design materials to enhance learning by making information more accessible and engaging. Whether using diagrams, charts, slides, or other visual aids, adhering to these principles helps ensure that the visual content supports and enhances educational goals. So overall, when we incorporate visual principles into the instructional design or to your presentations or lesson visuals, that would lead to effective and engaging educational materials, we focus first on clarity in its contrast, hierarchy, consistency, alignment, proximity, repetition, and simplicity. That way, we could create visuals that enhance comprehension, retention, ultimately improving their learning experience. The question is, how will you measure the font of a text in a visual material? In the preparation of your instructional material, or now we use the PowerPoint presentation, how will you measure the font of a text in a visual material? Would you mind to log in and place your comment on the comment section? To measure the font size of text in a visual material, we use point system, no? Where font size is typically specified in points. So 1 point equals to 1/72 of an inch. So in digital design software, you can usually find the font size setting or the text property or formatting menu on top of your uh, laptop or desktop. No. Alternatively, you can use a ruler tool to measure the height of the text in a printed material, converting it into points based on the fact that 1 inch is equal to 72 points. So look at the size of a 1 inch that is equal to 72 points. So this ensures accurate sizing and consistency in visual materials. If you're also using Manila paper as your visual materials, the size should matter also on based on the size of the room and the number of your students who will be maximizing the use of your Manila paper. Now, why are analogic visuals needed? What do we mean by analogic visuals? These are needed because they provide a tangible, relatable representation of the abstract concepts or complex information. So making them easier to understand and remember. So unlikely purely digital or theoretical representations, analogic visuals often use formal objects or scenarios to create clear, intuitive links to the subject matter. So this approach helps bridge the gap between the abstract by leveraging visual analogies to resonate with the viewer's existing knowledge and experiences. So by grounding abstract concept in familiarized contexts, analogic visuals enhance comprehension, retention, and engagement, making learning accessible and effective. So here are some of the examples of analogic visuals in various contexts. For example, in science class, comparing the structure of an atom to the solar system. So what illustration you can use to compare the atom to a solar system? Okay, an illustration showing an atom with electrons orbiting around the nucleus, simply similar to the planet orbiting the sun. So we help our students to visualize the concept of electron orbits to the central nucleus by relating it to a familiar solar system. In mathematics, we use pizza to explain fractions. Okay, if you do not have pizza, when you will be presenting the lessons, what are the replacement of such that symbolically they mean to be fraction or can be easily measured into same parts. Okay, so a pizza is divided into slices to different to represent different fractions. So it makes the concept of fractions more concrete by relating it to a common and relatable object. I have a question. Siguro at the next succeeding part. Let's give an example or of an add appeal element in a visual material. What is an adding appeal to a visual material? An interactive infographics about the water cycle, for example. We use vibrant, eye-catching colors to differentiate between the different stages of the water cycle, such as from the evaporation, condensation, precipitation, and the collection. So we mean to specify what particular part is clear and what particular part can be into a color that is very dark. No, so we enhance visual interest and help distinguish different parts of this water cycle. So we incorporate clickable elements or hover over the effects that provide additional information or animations for each stages of the water cycle. This will engage users actively, making the learning experience more dynamic and interactive. How about using illustrative icons? We use clear, simple icons for each stage, like the sun for evaporation or clouds for condensation, providing a quick, intuitive understanding of each stage of the cycle through familiar symbols. Okay, what is the purpose of animated transitions? The adding of smooth animations to show the transition between the different stages of the water cycle, such as water rising up or vapor as falling as rain. So we illustrates the process in a visually appealing manner and helps in reinforcing the learning concepts. So by integrating the colorful graphics, interactive features, illustrative icons, concise text, and animated transitions, this infographic on water cycle will become more appealing and engaging. So these elements will not only enhance visual attractiveness, but also to improve the educational effectiveness of the material by interactive and easier to understand. Now, I want you to think also of a particular topic wherein you can use also infographics into its useful form. Moving on, we have the process of visual designs. We have the element, arrangement, and pattern. Visual design involves creating effective visual communication by combining the various elements to convey information clearly and attractively. So here's a breakdown of the key aspects of these processes. The first one is the elements. Elements in visual design refer to the components that are used to create visual display. So these include both verbal and visual elements such as text, visuals, images, color shapes, or icons to be used. So these are elements, no? It may be in the form of text, in the form of image, color, or shape, or icon. Why do we need to have a visual elements into your presentations, but limited to pure text only, no? So these textual components, like the providing headings, body text, captions, and labels, they convey always information and provide context to the visual elements. What are visual elements? These include the graphical components, such as the images, icons, diagrams, and color schemes. So they enhance the visual appeal and help in illustrating the content. So the process of involving choosing which verbal and visual elements will be included in the design. This selection is based on the purpose of the display. For example, the audience needs and the message to be communicated. For instance, a science infographics might include detailed diagrams and technical terms, while a promotional poster might use more bold colors and minimal text. How to arrange these elements? In terms of arrangement, that's number two, refers to the selected elements are placed and organized within the visual display. It involves spatial organization of components to create cohesive and effective design. Elements are positioned in a way that guides the viewer's eyes through the information. So the key information should be prominent, while supplementary details can be placed in less central areas. How about the alignment? Proper alignment ensures that the elements are positioned in a visually appealing or orderly manner. Consistent alignment helps maintaining a clean and professional look. How about spacing? The spacing is between elements provides clutter and improves the readability. So it includes that the design is not also overwhelming and that each element has its own space. For example, in a magazine layout, we always provide the white spaces but not too fully blown in color. No, white spaces would lead you into separation of the columns of each pages or the columns of each lines. For example, magazines can be formed into how many columns for broadsheet and tabloid. No, for broadsheets, I think it's 6 columns. So our tabloid maybe 2 to 3 columns. Now we go to patterns. What are patterns? Anybody? So pattern in visual design refers to the underlying structure of framework that organizes the visual elements. So it determines the overall layout and how elements are related with one another with the design. So when you lay out a particular newspaper or a page, you need to provide with inverted S pattern. What is inverted S? Okay, if you draw letter S invertedly, the most important element should be placed on the left side, while the least important elements is placed at the right, below the right side. So if you talk about inverted, pabaliktad na S, the more that the eye is focused on the left upper portion of the space rather than looking at the center. So nauuna daw at the left because the titles, the headers, and mostly titles is always placed on the top left portion of the page or the slide. Okay. On the next slide, presentations provide you the visual design elements, the visual design patterns, and the visual design arrangements. So components that create the visual aspects of the design includes our graphics, images, colors, and shapes. Examples are icons, illustrations, photos, and patterns. To be realistic, the visuals that closely resemble the real world objects or scenes. For example, photographs of actual people or landscape used in presentations to provide authentic touch. What about analogy? These are visuals that use simply analogies to represent complex or abstract concepts, okay? As if what you are looking at it may not be actually what you are asking for. So it's upon the representations and decisions made by the brain, okay, processed by the brain of the learners would provide you different angles based on what they've seen. So that is analogic. And organization, so the structured arrangement of visual elements to create a coherent and understandable display. So it may be using grid layout to align the text and images systematically. Now we go to the verbal element. If we talk about verbal element, these are textual components of the PowerPoint or the presentation with the visual design that provide context and information. So headlines, descriptions, labels are part of the verbal element. So we have the letter style, the number of the style, the capitals, color, sizes, and spacing would mean to be very important when we present your PowerPoint or your visuals. Now we go to the ad appeals. Okay. We also have ad appeals, and these ad appeals may be in a surprise, in a texture, or interactions. We will be uh, tackling that one by one. Now we go to the visual design arrangement. First, we go to visual design patterns first. In the visual design patterns, we look into the alignment, the shape, the balance, the style, the color scheme, and color appeal. When we talk about the alignment, it's the placement of all the elements in relation to each other and the overall layout. Remember that your students could not be able to maximize a one page with everything that you wanted to place in one particular slide. No, the content or alignment should be consistent with its size and the number of objects that you're going to provide. So center aligning headings and left aligning body text for readability. Then we have the visual design arrangement. We have the proximity, directionals, figure ground, contrast, and consistency. Okay. We'll start with the visual designs called the elements. If we talk about designing elements, it should be either realistic when it's symbolically, it's analogic and organizational, as we mentioned. When we talk about realistic elements, these are the realistic visual elements closely resembling the actual objects, but you cannot place actually an apple in front of you because you were not able to get a concrete object of apple. So we get our representations of this apple in the form of photos or video of that particular topic. So they aim to create lifelike representations that helps viewers easily relate to and understand. Why do we need a realistic elements? These are used to provide an accurate and familiar representations of real-world objects or scenarios. So they help in making the content more relatable and easier to comprehend by representing it in a familiar context. So photographs of people, animals, landscapes, or real-life settings. For example, the photo of real classroom in educational materials will depict a learning environment. Now, When it comes to analogic visual elements are familiar analogies or metaphors to represent abstract or complex concepts. So they draw parallels between something unfamiliar and something that the viewer already understands. So analogic helps bridge the gap between complex or abstract ideas and the viewer's existing knowledge by using familiar objects or scenarios that are, as analogies by simply and clarify difficult concepts. Then the organizational. Organizational visual elements refer to the structured arrangement and systematic placements of visual components within a design. So this includes the layout and overall organizations of text, images, and other elements to create coherent and functional display. So when presenting visual elements such as realistic and abstract realistics, visuals in the context of psychological theories related to mathematics and language, it is essential to understand the optimal sequence for introducing these concepts at their rationale. So which should show first and why? Okay, would you mind to answer which should show first as teachers? Is it the realistic visual first or the abstract? Okay, I want you to key in your responses on the comment box. Ano dapat ang mauna kapag mag-present ka ng lesson? Yung totoong object ba o yung isang abstract object or illustrations or pictures only? Okay, inviting you to please key in your answers now. Which should show first and why? Now let's proceed to uh, your responses will be read after the presentation. So realistic first, before the abstract. So realistic visuals should be introduced first because they align more closely with the immediate recognition and understanding of familiar real objects and scenes. So that is the schema or the background knowledge of the child. So this approach builds the foundational understanding that is easier for the learners to grasp and relate to, setting a solid base or more complex or abstract concepts. So realistic visuals reduce the cognitive load by presenting information in a familiar and explicit or straightforward manner, making it easier for the learners to process and comprehend the new information. So by using realistic images alongside with verbal explanations, learners benefit from the dual processing of information, enhancing memory and retention and comprehension. So that's called the schema theory. Schema theory says that the realistic visuals activate the existing mental schema, facilitating the integration of new information and what the learners already know. So we'll be capitalizing on what they already know about the apple. If you talk about the apple, what's the color of the apple? No, what's the taste of the apple? Now I want you now to draw the apple, so it would be very easy for the student or the learner to draw the apple because in his eyes or in his memory, he or she was able to see the actual apple. Now, when deciding whether to introduce the parts of the apple and the parts of the earth first in a lesson, we consider the following. Which should you ask first? The parts of the apple or the parts of the earth? Please key in your answer. Which should be first asked? Is it the parts of the apple first or the parts of the earth? So ask first the parts of the apple first. Why? Why? Because of the familiarity and simplicity. So the parts of the apple are generally more familiar and simpler to understand for most learners, especially young students or beginners, because they are directly observable and relatable, making them a good starting point to introduce the concept of the solar or the parts of the earth. Now, discussing the apple's core, the seed, the skin, and the flesh involved with straightforward, tangible elements that the students may encounter in their everyday life. For the familiarity will help them establish a clear and concrete understanding of the basic parts and their functions. So that's the foundation of the abstract thinking. So starting with a familiar and concrete example like the apple provides the foundation for more abstract thinking. So once learners grasp the basic parts and their functions in a simple and to their familiar context, they can more easily transfer this understanding to a more complex and abstract concepts. So understanding the parts of the apple and how they work together will help them build the foundational knowledge and functions which could be applied when learning more about the structure of the earth. So introducing simple, complex, or simpler concepts first helps manage the cognitive load. By starting it with the familiar objects, you reduce the complexity of the information by being processed, making it easier for students to engage with and understand the material. Now, we go to organizing the topics, kinds, and elements. Why do you think it's important to organize the topic, the kinds, and elements in a material or in your presentation or in your PowerPoint presentation? We move on to the verbal design elements. It's the letter style, number style, capitals and colors and size. So when creating a PowerPoint presentation, what are the rules for verbal design elements? Okay. What rule do you follow when you choose the letter styles of your PowerPoint presentations? Is Kane your answer? How do you decide on the use of the styles? When you use capital letters and when you use in them in the presentation, what factors influence you to the choose of these capital letters and small letters, and what factors influence your choice of color and size for text in your slides? Are these very important when you're going to prepare your presentations? The answer is, of course, very important or yes. So when we talk about the letter style, we choose the right letter style, or we term it in the computer or in ICT as font, no, is crucial for the readability and professionalism. We use clean, easy to read fonts or body text. Can you give me an example of a font name that are easy to read fonts with a very good body text? Okay, it can be Arial or Calibri or uh, Bodoni. In deped, we are using the Bookman old Bookman, no? So avoid using too many different fonts in a single presentation to maintain consistency and reduce the visual clutters. What is the rule? We use a maximum of two different fonts only, one for the headings and one for the body text. Remember these two different fonts only. We ensure that the fonts are legible and appropriate for the presentation tones and audience. For example, in this part of our session, we are in formal lessons, so we use the formal presentations only, clear and straight Arabic presentations. What about the number style? We use the numbers or bullets to help organizing and presenting information. The use of numbers or bullets help in organizing and presenting information clearly. So the numbered lists for sequential steps and processes and bullet points for non-sequential lists. So we will be continuing our sessions for the next meeting. Thank you, everyone.